Welcome back, amazing viewers. So today we are checking German Autobahn. With our sphere type, let's zoom right into this one, guys.
In a world constrained by speed limits and excessive nannying, there is something wonderfully liberating about the German Autobahn system. It's also one of the few times you can utter the following sentence, well, at least Adolf Hitler got this one right. The reality is actually that the Uber-dictator really just jumped on a successful bandwagon and then claimed the glory for himself, which sounds very much like him. The German Autobahn, which translates very literally as car runway, forms the basis of the first modern national expressway system and today stretches for over 13,183 kilometers, making it the third longest system in the world behind the US and China. When you consider the size of Germany compared to other nations, that's really quite extraordinary. Then there is the frankly giddy prospect of traveling as fast as you like, because yes, long stretches of the German Autobahn come without any speed limits, making it one of the few places in the world where you can push your foot down on the accelerator without any fear of flashing lights behind you. And I've driven on the Autobahn a few times. It's pretty exciting and also slightly terrifying, and I don't have a car that goes particularly fast. Considering we are essentially just talking about roads today, the German Autobahn system is pretty iconic around the world, but to start this story, we need to begin a little further south, in the land of pizza, pasta, and excessive hand gestures. It's Italy, by the way, in case you didn't know. Italy. While the Autobahn can be considered the grandfather, or grandmother for that matter, of modern high-speed highway systems, there was a road that predates it. And since we do like to give credit where it's due, it's only fair we begin with that. The Milano-Laghi motorway opened in 1924 and was the brainchild of civil engineer and entrepreneur Piero Puricelli. The road essentially connected Milan with the lake regions of the north, allowing the well-to-do to escape the hustle and bustle of the city quickly and efficiently. This was at a time when there were only roughly 41,000 cars in Italy, with most of the population still using carts, bicycles, or just their own 2 feet. So this was very much a rich person superhighway. While the first Autobahn didn't appear until 1932, the seeds had been sown well before. The disastrous terms of the Treaty of Versailles had crippled Germany after World War I, and while many believed they fully deserved it, if anybody had a crystal ball at the time, I'm willing to bet things would have been rather different. With the country experiencing high unemployment and struggling to kickstart its industries once again, the construction of the Autobahn system was seen as a way of stimulating growth and prosperity in the country. Germany had already dabbled with the Avis experimental highway in Berlin, which opened in 1921. The Avis is a bizarre racetrack Autobahn hybrid, which is technically the oldest controlled access highway anywhere in the world. I don't think I'll be ruffling any German feathers when I say that it's not exactly the most interesting racetrack in the world, with just 2 very long straights and 4 turns. And yeah, that's it. The beauty of Avis is that it's also very much a part of the Autobahn system, forming the northern part of Bundesautobahn 115. Over time, the closure of the road for racing became more problematic, and the last race was held in 1998. The first purpose-built Autobahn to be used exclusively by everyday men, women, and hopefully not children was the Autobahn 555, which still connects Cologne and Bonn and was built between 1929 and 1932. However, when it opened in 1932, it was still considered a country road and wasn't given official Autobahn status until 1958. The stretch of road has been nicknamed the Diplomatenrennbahn, the diplomat racetrack, thanks to the high numbers of diplomats who were said to enjoy the occasional high-speed outing from Bonn back when it was capital of East Germany. When Hitler seized power in 1933, the idea of a large-scale Autobahn system was already well in the works, and seeing the potential benefit it would bring, Hitler jumped on it. A man called Fritz Todt was brought in as Inspector General of German road construction, and the system was seen as the ideal way of bringing down Germany's uncomfortably high unemployment rate. It was noted by visiting Americans at the time that Germany was about to begin building a huge road network, but it seemed to be lacking some rather important machines, namely cars. And it was true. Certainly compared to parts of the US, Germany didn't exactly have a vast fleet of automobiles on its roads. But luckily, Herr Hitler had another plan. He intended to provide the people with cheap and cheerful cars that would be for everybody. The people's car. The Volkswagen. In 1938, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche completed his design for the new car, and a production plant was set up in Wolfsburg. Over 300,000 Germans paid at least part, if not all, of the cost in advance, and no doubt many were rubbing their hands together with glee over the prospect of a shiny new car and a wonderful, expansive Autobahn to drive it on. Alas, that was not to be. Hitler ordered the Wolfsburg plant to switch to military vehicles on the eve of war, and not one German received a new car or a refund. I know on a grand scale of Hitler's offences this doesn't really even come in the top 10, but I mean, what a fraudulent prick. Workers from around Germany were brought to various camps along the new road projects and put to work building the Autobahn system. Now, it's important to mention that this was certainly not always voluntary, and many were forced to work under the compulsory Reich labor service. It's therefore probably not a great surprise to hear that work continued at a slow pace right up until the outbreak of World War II. During one of his many barely comprehensible screaming speeches, Hitler made the grand announcement that the Autobahn project would employ around 600,000 people with 1,000 kilometers worth of roads added each year. Like many of Hitler's blusters, this fell well short, and it's thought that at its peak, the project was employing around 120,000 people, and by 1942, when things started to go south for Germany and Adolf Hitler, only around 3,800 kilometers out of a planned 20,000 kilometers of freeways had been completed. The propaganda image of healthy, Aryan worker people working joyfully on the Autobahn system for the greater good of the German homeland was, well, utter crap. With able-bodied workers required on either the front lines or in factories pumping ammunition and military hardware out, the workforce building the Autobahn system was almost exclusively forced workers and concentration camp inmates. With new roads appearing around Germany, you might have assumed that during World War II the German military would be barreling around them. But the truth was the early Autobahn system wasn't particularly useful to the Wehrmacht. Trains were still far more efficient when it came to transporting large numbers of troops, and as the war slowly worsened, petrol became more and more scarce, meaning that the roads were often left virtually empty. In fact, this was the only time when bicycles were allowed on the Autobahn. Although they certainly did get some use, although probably not in the way they were designed. With airfields around Germany high on Allied target lists and often attacked from the air, finished Autobahn roads were frequently used by the Luftwaffe as makeshift runways, with the planes often kept nearby under camouflage. No doubt the Allies began picking up on this, and by the end of the war, large stretches of the roads had been badly damaged. Work pretty much ground to a halt in 1943 as the Nazis were ejected from the Soviet Union with their tails firmly between their legs, and Hitler's plans began to implode. As with many aspects of life after World War II, the sections of the Autobahn in West Germany fared much better than those in the East. In the West, most damaged roads were repaired shortly after the end of the war, while in the East, the pace was much slower and sometimes barely moved at all. There was also a noticeable difference in users. In East Germany, the Autobahns were frequently used by the military and state-owned farming or manufacturing vehicles, whereas in the West, they received a much wider use. In the 1950s, the West German government authorized the restart of construction, while in the GDR, things were sporadic, to say the least, and when they did get around to repairing or even adding to the existing system, it was often done with materials greatly inferior to those being used by the West. Even today, there are roads such as the A2, which crosses the old east and west boundary, where there's a noticeable difference in surface quality as you pass between them. While the western section feels relatively smooth, the eastern section is much bumpier, thanks to the old concrete blocks that typically formed the old East German Autobahns.
Oh, wow.
On the 9th of November 1989, as the world watched in raptured awe, large crowds gathered at the Berlin Wall. Nobody's entirely sure how this momentous occasion was going to pan out, but after Public Relations Minister Günter Schabowski announced on live television that travel restrictions had been lifted, people began passing through the gates in Berlin or simply started smashing down the hated symbol. It was a truly historic moment, and while I doubt too many were thinking about finally linking up the Autobahn system in those heady days of freedom and reunification, it did, of course, mean just that. While the epicenter of all the drama was based in Berlin, in the coming days, checkpoints up and down the dividing line were opened and people began to pour back and forth across the border. In the coming years, Germany instigated its German Unification Transport Project, which included rail lines, waterways, and of course new or improved autobahns. There were a total of 7 road projects totaling some 17.3 billion euros, most of which have been completed by the early 2000s.
Wow, that's quite early.
Today, the Autobahn system stretches for 13,183 kilometers and reaches to all corners of Germany, though if you look on a map, you'll see that the concentration is higher in some areas than others, with the west the densest and the south and northeast much sparser. This is either down to terrain, with the south being much more mountainous, or high levels of urban population, as is the case for the western region. In the last decade, Germany has undergone a huge widening and rehabilitation program on its Autobahn system, with a very busy A5 in the southwest and the A8 going east-west, two of the most significant upgrades. There are only a few roads now with just 2 lanes going both ways, with most having 3 or 4. It goes without saying that this is one of the finest kept highway systems in the world, with much of the tarmac laid using a freeze-resistant concrete mix which prevents it from cracking, as you often see in other parts of the world. The system comes with 17,000 telephones by the side of the roads that people can call for motor assistance on. Surely, in the age of the iPhone 64 or whatever it is we're on these days, nobody is actually using these roadside telephones anymore, but surprisingly, they're still used on average 150 times every day, a figure down from 710 years ago. It's against the law to stop for any reason on the Autobahns except for emergencies, but luckily for anybody traveling, the Germans do a fine job at maintaining rest stops, service stations, and idyllic picnic spots.
That's great. That's really great.
To quote one chiseled aviation pilot from the 80s, some people just feel the need for speed. And for those kinds of people, the Autobahn system is probably the best place for them. However, the widely held belief that the whole system is free from speed limits is about as accurate as the dodgy propaganda back in the war. The Autobahn system does have some speed limits, but not everywhere, meaning it's one of the few places in the world without a blanket speed limit. Limits are placed on certain kinds of vehicles and whether they're carrying passengers or not. For example, a bus with passengers standing cannot travel above 60 kilometers or 37 miles per hour, while if everybody is seated, it can travel 80 kilometers per hour or 50 miles per hour. There are also plenty of sections, such as on-ramps, interchanges, specifically dangerous stretches, and parts under repair, where speed limits are certainly enforced. So you might be thinking, well, Germany must experience significantly higher levels of traffic accidents, right? Well, of course not. This is Germany. They figured it out. Firstly, German traffic exams are fairly rigorous, meaning that those who emerge from them are typically much better trained drivers than in other countries. With the system also kept in excellent condition, the chances of an accident caused by an issue with the road surface is drastically reduced. And the statistics back this all up. Germany doesn't necessarily experience any more crashes on the Autobahn system than other European countries with speed limits on their rapid transit roads, and the risk of being killed on the Autobahn is about half of that as on American interstates. Whatever the Germans are doing, it's working. But that hasn't stopped a steadily growing movement to apply blanket limits across the country. Numerous votes have been brought forth regarding speed limits in Germany, and so far they've all been rebuffed. The Germans are proud of their Autobahn system and the freedom they have on it, and rightly so. Those from countries living under the yoke of repressive speed limits often simply assume the Germans must be all out flying along at blistering speeds and no doubt causing mayhem on the roads. But the truth couldn't be more different. The Germans are brought up to respect speed, and they're also taught how to handle it. The Autobahn system is a hugely impressive road network that has been evolving since the 1930s, but perhaps equally impressive is that this is an example of how people can be given greater freedom and responsibility to drive how they wish without turning the Autobahns into the German version of wacky races. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Manscaped, who I'm linking to below. And thank you for watching.
Whoa, that's some serious enlightenment. I mean, the year when they started being serious with creating their Autobahn, and when they finished it in early 20s, and then the telephone, the SOS emergency on the highway, and the no speed limit. Actually, I was just literally in a class listening to all of that, and I must say I've learned a few things about the German Autobahn, and it's amazing. I mean, when I saw no limit, I was like, okay, why don't they have limits? I mean, because I always feel like a bump on the road or speed limit can, help regulate accident and everything. But it's great to know that without the bumps, there are certain number you can't exceed in driving, and compared to others, there's less chaos on their road, so they have other regulating factors to guide in that, and that is really amazing and thoughtful. I hope you learned something from this video like I did, and I hope you enjoy watching it. And please do not forget to subscribe if you are yet to do so. Feel free to support this channel if you want to, and until next time, bye bye.